Welcome to the Therapeutic Food Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Marian Mitchell. I'm an integrative nutrition health coach, therapeutic diet expert, and founder of The Road to Living Whole. There are many different diets out there. It's hard to know which one is right for you with your chronic illness and autoimmune disease. In this podcast, I'm going to share with you the foundational pieces every single therapeutic diet out there shares, and also how to use the best one for your particular diagnosis. If you've been looking for a meal planning partner, help navigating the complicated healthcare system, and want to feel better quickly, I'm your girl. Grab your kombucha and notebook. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited for today's guests and the topic of the day. Food addiction is very real. There's a lot of shame and stigma around it, which I think we really need to work through as a culture. And there's a lot of different perspectives on it, different titles that we're working through. We're kind of in our infancy with really learning about food, where the inability to maybe the addiction. I'm just going to use the word addiction at this point. And I think we're going to kind of tease that apart through this episode. But where the addiction comes from, where it's rooted at, that it's a journey. It's not a black or white, I'm addicted and then I'm not. It's a very real thing. And I have the two guests are Paige and Jamie. And Paige is a nurse and a coach and has gone through food addiction herself. And Jamie is a coach and has also lived experience with this. And I see in my practice a lot of restriction. That's a lot of what I see. And I also have seen the binge eating disorder on the outside looking in, and I don't have real world experience with it. And I do know that people who've gone through it have a different perspective than those of us on the outside looking in. And again, I want to hopefully be a catalyst for helping remove the stigma and shame that goes with food. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic. Paige and Jamie, thank you so much for taking time away from your community and your podcast to come onto mine and talk with my community. So go ahead and introduce yourselves, share your story, and then we're going to tease apart the topic of the day.
Jamie, do you want to go first?
Sure. I am Jamie Morgan Reno. I am again, I guess author now, podcaster, coach, and someone who's lived this life of recovering from, or learning how to live with processed food use disorder, as I refer to it. And I have been in recovery since 2008, end of 2007, beginning of 2008. So that is something that I have many years of experience kind of working my way through. I've got a lot of lived experience kind of navigating the food landscape as life changed. And I've had many curveballs thrown at me in the last 15 plus years of recovery, 17 years of recovery now, many curveballs thrown my way. And I have consistently found my way through without going back to those, deep ingrained food and binge eating behaviors that I had for many, many years. So that's my background. And Paige and I got together to start our podcast, Real Food Recovery, 2.5 years ago, about 2.5 years ago already. I can't believe it. And we have over 100 episodes now and available on all the podcast platforms. So that podcast has morphed into now a recovery community online that we support women from all over the world, who are navigating, their own processed food use disorder journeys and recovery from that.
How awesome. And Paige, tell us about yourself.
Well, I have not been in the game as long as Jamie. I'm only like 4.5 years in, but I am kind of hanging on her coattails as far as seeing all the different changes that she has made. And someday I'm going to be where she is. But now I am still pretty somewhat new, I think, in the recovery world, because I do think this is a lifelong journey. Would you agree with that, Jamie?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so 4.5 years is, tiddlywinks compared to people that have been in decades. And I do think it's an ever evolving process. And I continue to make edits all the time to my journey. And my biggest issue was sugar, that I really didn't struggle with the salty stuff, but sugar has always plagued me from the time of my earliest memories. And so I have fought very hard to give up all sweeteners and sugar and things like that. And just when you think you've got it under wraps, ironically, over this past weekend, I had a major sidestep like I have not had in years with sugar. And it made me realize that I still use it like a addict would use drugs. And it's a very fast and furious, panicky, get as much as you can, as fast as you can, just voraciously. And it was just, I'm turning it into learning experiences. And there were a lot of things that led up to that incident on Saturday evening, and taking a deep look at the things that I need to change. But I think looking at those incidents with curiosity really helps the learning curve and keeps shame at bay. So my experience really has just been with getting off sugar these past 4.5 years. And you know what? That's the major thing I focus on. And that's such a Herculean task for me that the other things, yes, I try to eat clean all the other time. I'm a pretty clean eater, but if I can get through major events with being sugar free, I'm not worried about the other stuff. I've got enough bandwidth to do this one thing right now, and that's my major focus, is staying off sugar, especially because it's everywhere you turn. There's opportunities for it at every event, every vacation. There's dessert after every meal. You know how it is. But
Yeah.
so that is my main focus. And I would say that's the main focus of why I got into recovery, because I was so close, but I couldn't quite get there on my own. And
Hmm.
giving up sugar altogether on my own, I just could not. I could go 2 weeks and then I'd have a sidestep, and then I'd go another 2 weeks and have a major sugar binge, but I could not quite get there until I got into recovery, where you've got to have support. You've just got to
Yeah.
have support.
Yeah, so let's talk about Jamie. Let's talk about processed food use disorder.
Yes.
And I think that that plays a huge role in sugar because it's in all processed food. It's in all the convenience food, it's in salad dressings, it's in everything. And so I would love to tease that apart a bit more because again, it's not just a simple
No.
definition or a simple thing.
Yeah. Sugar, I mean, sugar is processed, right? So that's why it sort of falls under that whole term. The reason that I gravitate towards this, and again, there's a lot of movement trying in the industry, trying to the recovery industry and the counseling world, trying to get the P processed food use disorder,
Hmm.
um, trying to get that terminology into the DSM, because it is a disorder of eating, just like anorexia, bulimia, and other specified food use disorders, right? So
Hmm.
it very well could, processed food use disorder could fall under OSFED, right?
Hmm.
Which is that other specified. But I think it's important to understand that um, when we call it, the reason I gravitate towards that processed food use disorder is because sugar is one of the original processed foods, right? Coming
Yeah.
from the sugar cane and the way that it was processed even 300 years ago, right? They were starting to process sugar cane into granulated sugar or crystallized sugar.
Hmm.
And that started to interact with our brains and bodies in ways that our biology was not able to keep up with.
Hmm.
And then that sugar turned into all these other, areas, things, including alcohol and other ingredients that were used in foods and the food supply, starting even 200 plus years ago. Gosh, even 2,000 years ago, right? We started to see alcohol. So I think when I think about why um that terminology matters is because yes, some people will say, well, there's never been anyone addicted to broccoli. There's never been anybody addicted, to single ingredient foods. But I would challenge that, and I would just say that there can be binging happening across the board. And I think it's unfair to say it's food addiction. I think
Mhm.
that what we see a lot of disordered behavior around processed foods. That's
Yeah.
whether it's alcohol or, again, thousands of years, right? We've seen alcohol abuse, hundreds of plus years, we've seen sugar abuse. And and is that addiction? Maybe that's not for us to say, but is it definitely abuse? Yes. And can we link that to the way the food is processed or the ingredients are processed? Yes. But I think to go one step further and call it, in general food addiction, I think is um can do us more harm than good.
I can see that. But also, it is usually when people think of falling off the wagon or sidestepping or things like that, it is with processed food. There's not a lot of guilt with eating whole, real
Right.
foods. And I would have to say that, like I said in the beginning, in my world, what I see is people using food as a form of trying to gain control of their life. My community is a lot of people who are chronically ill, suffering from debilitating symptoms that interfere with their life. And they think, like, oh, if I restrict more and I restrict more and I restrict more, then I'll be healthy. Right. If I get rid of all these things with mold or all these things with histamine or all these things with oxalates or all these things, if I get rid of everything but meat or I get rid of everything, if I only eat plants, like that's where I'm going to gain health. And in that can easily become more of a need for control or even a trauma response
Mhm.
versus and I think that that's something to add to the conversation as well
Yes,
is like, what, and I think that this is, you could tell me if I'm wrong, but getting to the root of why food is an issue is such a
exactly right.
powerful thing.
And that's my whole point, is that the term food addiction does not adequately explore what's going on underneath, why the food is being used the way it's being used.
Yeah.
And you hit the nail on the head, and which is exactly why I moved away from that food addiction terminology, because it takes the label off of the individual and puts it on like what's going on underneath that is driving you and me to use that food for comfort and ease and peace or distraction or comfort or soothing. What's happening underneath it all? Because it really is never about the food. It's always about
Right.
what's going on that's driving us to whatever that food was.
Yeah, I will say I have I had a client this morning who she's going through some major life changes, separation, kids are, and all that goes with that, and recovering from multiple illnesses that are just debilitating her life. And she's like, I've just started eating ice cream every night, and I've been doing this, and and I was just like, okay, it's okay that you recognize that food is soothing
That's right.
and there's and that's okay. We need to find other coping mechanisms.
Yes.
But we don't have to feel shame or guilt over that. We can add in some healthier options that are maybe
Right.
more nourishing and more satisfying.
That's right.
Again, they're minimally processed, right? They're not processed foods that we turn to, and they in turn are a little bit more satisfying, but nothing can replace healthy coping mechanisms when you're going through something hard.
Yeah.
And food can be, unfortunately, and one that can for one, there's a lot of shame around it, right?
Yeah.
Like
Demonized. Yeah.
it's very demonized. It is very much I fell off the wagon and I've just been eating ice cream and and then I've been eating ice cream every night. So now I'm eating crap because why not? And it is this whole spiral of unhealthy thinking. And really the root of it is I don't have healthy coping mechanisms and I don't have any other way
That's
to
right.
process through my feelings that I'm going through.
That's
Right.
recovery. That's what recovery is.
Yeah. So let's talk about that because really, I mean, it's just like with chronic illness, there's always a root cause, right? It's not a pill
That's right.
deficiency, there's something else going on. This is exactly the same thing. So let's start to tease that apart.
So I think that again, Paige, I don't know if perfect example would be, what you were sharing earlier about, what led to, this weekend, your sidestep, right?
Oh,
We're
yeah, yeah,
talking
yeah.
about how you were noticing that, overscheduled, overbooked, overstressed, overworked, all the things.
Yeah.
And it resulted in food, but it wasn't the underlying root cause.
Yeah, that's right. I was sharing before that I had a sidestep like I haven't had in years with sugar this past weekend, and I know it's been a crazy hectic week, probably the past 2 weeks. I usually have Saturdays off where I can kind of catch up on life, and those have been booked solid. So there was literally no downtime. I usually have one morning where I don't have to wake up to an alarm that I can just kind of lollygag my way up. I That was taken from me, and your feet hit the ground running. I had been getting to bed later than I normally do. My sleep hadn't been that great. So, and you, I literally was feeling that tightness in my chest, and irrational hunger starts creeping in. And we had grandkids over, and I'm feeding them some things that I would normally like to just, fall face forward into. And I made the mistake of taking one bite of a leftover melty piece of ice cream that nobody finished. And it just literally, the wheels came off the bus after that. And I got into several more things. But had I been calm, had I had appropriate rest, I had been under eating, I think, the past week, all of those things caught up to me in a big, bad, ugly way. And by the way, anytime that you're ever under eating, don't think you're getting ahead. You are putting yourself so far behind the eight ball. It
Yes.
was just a series of circumstances where I wasn't getting enough nutrition this week for what my body needed. And yeah, backfired in a big old way. And so it wasn't a food problem, it was a sleep problem, it was a stress problem, it was inadequate nutrition problem. Um, all of those things culminated in one big shebang. And so anytime that we use food for reasons other than nutrition, we're giving it a bigger job than it was ever designed to do. And most of the time, what people are looking for is comfort. They're looking to numb some other emotion in some way, and you can usually dial it back to people are just looking for comfort for some reason. It may be boredom, it may be stress,
Mm.
it may be anxiety, it may be pain, but oftentimes people that are responding normally to normal cues within their bodies aren't going to be overeating. They would be satiated, especially if they're eating the single ingredient, non-processed foods, because the brain cooperates with that. The brain and the gut communicate with one another. And if you're eating fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, things like that, when you take a bite, it registers in the gut that, yeah, this is appropriate food for how your body was designed. It'll send the signal to the brain that we've had enough. Those hormones that tell our brain we've had enough work properly. But whenever you're eating the processed food, those signals get all jumbled up. And so the brain's going, whoa, 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 I don't know when to stop, because what I think I'm feeling is that was really good. I've got this big dopamine spike and I want more, 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 more. That's the only thing my brain's telling me, but I'm confused because my stomach is overly full, but my brain is still begging me for more. So that's one of the reasons that we encourage the use of single ingredient foods. It's so it works in harmony with how our bodies were designed to function.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I want to be also, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's very important to have that foundation, right, of those single ingredient foods. And I also want to be, um, you know, I think, transparent as far as my journey, like you mentioned, Marian, about your client earlier who's going through a major transition in her own life and how she is, back using foods that maybe she wouldn't have used before, or is back in foods that she wasn't in before. That is something that I have a lot of experience with in my current, journey of life. And I have found that um, there are certain behaviors with food that are coming back to me that I haven't dealt with in a long time as I'm going through also a separation and divorce. And what I'm noticing is, giving myself lots of grace to say that that is why, the idea that, if I'd sat there and said, oh my gosh, I'm a food addict and I cannot have this food and I absolutely will not let myself bend these rules, that would add shame and control, white knuckle death grip on, on my food. That would add just more stress onto a very stressful life situation.
Mhm.
And I've had, folks that I, including a, dietitian and another recovery sponsor, tell me, hey, if the worst thing you're doing in a major life transition of separation and divorce is having an ice cream sandwich at night, I think you're okay. Like
Yeah.
that, they're like, hey, Jane, like, you could be, snorting an 8 ball. You could be drinking every night. P.S. I
Mhm.
never struggled with drugs or alcohol, but that's their point. They're like, you could be doing way worse things than having an ice cream sandwich at night. So my point is, let's keep it in perspective and let's keep it in balance. And also
Mhm.
trust that as we begin to heal, as we begin to find our peace again, our center again during stressful weeks, like Paige is talking about, or stressful life transitions like I'm living through, your client is living through, you will find balance.
Yeah,
Your
I
body
think
will come back into balance.
yeah, and I think a lot of people think that once we're quote unquote derailed or off the wagon or whatever, that like there's no getting back on the horse, so to
Yeah,
speak,
it's
that
not true.
like, oh my gosh, I failed, I'm weak, and I just and not even just recognizing like I'm just stressed. And
Exactly.
this makes my soul happy. Like there have been times in my life that I've been really, really stressed. One of them was I was my parents and my daughter's dad had moved out of state and I was all by myself. And I didn't like asking my friends for help because they're friends, not family. And I was going to Starbucks twice a day, every day. And it was really expensive. I didn't even have the money for it, but like it just I needed it. And being a health coach and all that, I sat down and I was like, what is it that the Starbucks specifically gives me? And I'm like, back when I was, freshman year of college, senior year of high school, I would go to friends, we would study at Starbucks and drink the coffee and you'd smell it. And it just made me feel really supported and happy. Right. And once I recognized that, I was able to reach out to my friends, like, hey, I'm struggling. I need help. I'm drowning in life. I miss you, my friends. So my friends just started showing up randomly out of the blue, and they would be like, they'd look around and be like, hey, looks like you need your laundry folded. And they would just sit down and talk, chit chat with me while I did dishes and they did laundry,
Mhm.
and they just started showing up. And then I didn't need that anymore.
Hmm.
Right. And then I
So
find when I'm,
connection.
yeah. And so it's like, removing the shame, like we've talked about, like it's not addiction, it's just some like what is it that I'm missing, and again giving yourself grace, like okay, I'm eating ice cream every night, well what if I have my real food, like I have a no bake chocolate fudge, right, and it's all real food ingredients, super satisfying, really really hard to overeat because you just get so full, but it
Very rich,
also
right?
satisfies that comfort that I need from
Mhm.
it, but I'm also doing it in a way that's nourishing. And I think that recognizing that this is a season and I'm not weak or, um,
Yes.
doing something wrong,
Mhm.
by needing comfort. I think and that's part of the process, right? Is recognizing what feelings are normal and that it's a season and I'm not a failure or that we're so mean to ourselves.
One of the
Yes.
things that I wanted to bring out too is when we work with people in recovery, we don't always start with food. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be food. Is sleep
Right.
your biggest problem? Let's start with that. Or
Mhm.
what's killing you most? Let's start there. Is it stress? Is it movement? Is it spirituality? Is it connection? And you don't have to, we never say, let's just go in and change everything. In fact, we say, don't do that. The
Yeah.
opposite of that, even with food, let's not change everything all at once. But I just did want to bring that up that we don't necessarily always have to start with food. We can start with other areas that actually, once you get those under control, like you were saying with connection with your friends, then there is a natural propensity that gives you the motivation that maybe wants to look at the next thing because it feels so good when you start feeling better in other areas
Your
too.
bandwidth broadens, right? Like it
Yes.
widens. So
Yes.
like once you address that need that wasn't being met, then you have the capacity to be able to
That's exactly
tackle
right.
more.
Yeah, think about sleep. If you're well rested, you've got supersonic abilities that, let's face it, when you are fatigued, you just don't have the ability to do much.
Yeah.
We have four foundational principles. One is the single ingredient food, the sleep, 7 to 9 hours, whatever that is. Spirituality, whatever that looks like to you. We don't tell people to go to church, just some type of higher power that you can turn to when life kicks you in the teeth, and then movement. So that's kind of where we start to as a solid foundation, whether you're in recovery or not. Those are just good habits to look at in your life for a solid foundation.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's important to, Paige and I have a saying, we are, food plan neutral, and we just work on ourselves and encouraging our members and listeners to stay, processed food free, to keep processed
Hmm.
foods out of the equation as much as possible, because we know they do create these super normal, superhuman responses, stimulus
Yeah, so
responses.
as we are health coaches, I think we could maybe dive into why is processed food so addictive? And really, it's because it's designed to be. When the cigarette industry started to come under attack, quote unquote, for how cancerous, carcinogenic it was and how unhealthy it was. And they were losing money by the billions. They shifted their energy and resources and money into food. And how can we make people buy more food?
Mm.
And so it's designed to tickle our brain and
Beautifully
to
said.
light things up and make us feel artificially really good. And they're designed for that. They actually there's chemicals that make our taste buds less sensitive, so real food does taste very bland. When people are eating, they say Americans eat up to 60% on average. So there's people who eat more. 60% of their diet is ultra processed
Yeah.
food.
Yeah.
That does that messes with our body's physiology. Really
Totally.
is it's empty calories, zero nutrition with chemicals that desensitize our taste buds and give us artificial dopamine highs. And so, of minimizing processed food, for one, it's a process because food doesn't taste good for the first couple weeks, right? Like, so it's really
But your taste
difficult.
buds change. They do
They do,
change.
but those first 2 weeks are really hard because you feel like there's no joy in eating, right? It's
Seasoning,
true.
lots of seasoning.
Right. And most people don't know how to cook and they don't know how to
Yeah.
use seasoning. I have a family member who she tries so hard, you guys, to cook. And she tries using the herbs, but she mixes things that don't go together. And then she's like, I don't know why it tasted bad. And she actually inspired my seasoning guide because I was like, these are the seasonings that go together. And then I was like,
There
I
you
should
go.
just make this into a guide. But it's like there's this whole using single, like we have to recognize that a lot of this isn't, again, it's not us failing in any way. It's designed. We're kind of at a disadvantage when we eat a lot of processed food. So I love the idea of, for one, the four pillars, and then
Mhm.
the single ingredient food. I think, gosh, that makes it so simple,
Mhm.
right? But also
Yeah.
recognizing like an apple's going to taste very different when you start your journey into 2 weeks in. Like it's going to become the sweetest thing. And then it's also like, okay, if you've never really eaten a lot of real food, you really don't know what a green bean tastes like,
That's
right?
true.
But when your taste buds are used to ultra processed food, when you bite into a green bean, it tastes like dirt. It really does. And it's like this weird crunch. Like I know people who don't like crunchy food. It's weird. But the crunch is like the best part, right? But these plants and stuff, they taste really bitter. They taste very earthy, which is dirt. And fruit doesn't taste very sweet. And so there's this whole thing, obviously we want to get to the root of why we're turning to food, but also recognize, okay, the industry is against us and we need to be
Yes.
patient with ourselves. So again, I feel like it's a lot of self-reflection, a lot of grace, a lot of patience, and a lot of um, just really trying to understand what we're doing and why.
And this is why you need support. This is why support is essential in recovery. You just cannot do this on your own.
Mhm.
As Vera Tarman says, if you could, you would, and you haven't by now, so you can't. Uh, and it sums up well. You've got to have people who have been down that road to guide you, even if it's just to say, it's going to get better. Hang in there, it's going to get better. Or try these spices. Whatever it takes, we've figured out every trick in the book to get you through those sharp edged days, to smooth out those rough edges, to make them a little smoother and a little more palatable, to get up and be willing to do it again the next day. And that's why, so Jamie and I started our podcast originally, and then that just naturally morphed into this online community that we have at Real Food Recovery, where we support people who are going through all these things that you're saying and trying to get off the ultra processed food. It is a journey. And then from that, we wrote our book, Real Food Recovery. If food isn't the answer, what's the question? So then we
Oh,
can
I
try and
love
help even
that.
more people, because we don't want to see people suffer and go through these things that you're talking about. We've
Mhm.
figured out a way to make it a little easier to get to where people want to go. We just don't want to see people suffer. It's miserable. It's miserable to be trapped in that cycle of the ultra processed food where you cannot get off that hamster wheel and you want to so bad. It wrecks people's lives. I
Yeah.
mean, financially, relationships, your job, just in your inner peace. That's the
Mhm.
biggest one for me. I just don't want to be jonesing and craving all day long. It
Well, I
wrecks.
think it does, but I think it's less about the food, right? And not having recovery. I think what Paige is so beautifully describing is not having recovery is
Yeah,
what
Mhm.
wrecks our lives, right? Not having
right,
those tools, not having those coping
right,
mechanisms. It's not the food that wrecks it. It's the fact that we don't have other coping mechanisms, so we go to the food.
right.
Mhm.
So, and I
Thank you
think
for
that's beautiful the way Paige is describing it. It's true. And that was my experience as well before I found recovery.
Yeah, I don't want to be preoccupied with the food because I want to have this big, beautiful life. And it's very difficult to have a big, beautiful life if you've got ultra processed food tapping on your shoulder saying, I need a hit because I've got stress. I need a hit because my boyfriend broke up with me. I need a hit because I'm mad at my sister. I need a hit because, X, Y,
Yeah.
Z. And that's what we, work on in recovery is finding ways to cope other than food.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that's so powerful. And what you guys are doing is beyond my skill set. You guys are steps ahead of the people in your community. And I'm sure the mutual support and encouragement is just invaluable. Um,
Thank you.
just to kind of the other side of it is when people are so focused on food because they're trying to heal their bodies
Mhm.
and they're just looking for that next thing, and it is a disorder because it's just more and more restriction and more stress, and it's
Yes,
not really getting to the root. And a lot what I see is like, again, it's that, well, if I just cut out one more thing, if I and food still rules their lives. I can't
that's
eat
right.
this, I can't eat that, I'm hungry,
It's
but
working
there's
backwards. It's
it is.
restriction is working backwards.
And
And
I
that's,
still see it as an
I lived
issue
that life
because
too. It was
yeah.
horrible. Just what you're describing. There's you constantly pulling things out, thinking this was the next. Now the next thing was needed to be pulled out, and I was given it by a doctor, and supervised by a doctor, but I still found it to be very restrictive after a while. It
And
helped.
and it does, it gives you that sense of control
Yes.
again, and that's, I have some control over my life, but it's again not getting to that root.
Yes.
And when you have something even beyond your mind, but something physically that's just consuming your days, you're in pain, you're uncomfortable, whatever a lot of it's pain related or just fatigue and just not being able to function well. So you add this other layer. And at the end of the day, like I specialize in therapeutic diets and meal plans around that. But I always say, like, the biggest goal is not restriction, it's nourishment. Your cells need to function optimally. And so I don't, perfection is beneficial in a way, but it's unattainable. And
Sure.
what I want is just the focus on is you need enough calories, because people will undereat and then binge. Like I've had people be like, I ended up in the closet with chocolate. I didn't even have chocolate in my
Yeah.
house. They black out
Yeah.
and they go to the store and they
Mhm.
buy their junk food of, their favorite calorie source of choice, and they wake up in a closet eating it. And
Hmm.
I'm just like, that's not that, no, like that's like
You're
totally
restricting, this is what
backwards.
happens.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, the goal is nourishment and health, and overly restricting, while restricting certain aspects of food, mold, dietary mold, histamine, oxalates, whatever it is that people are told they need to minimize for a time. The whole point is for your body and your mind to be resilient, physically, to be resilient emotionally, to be resilient in our thinking. And there's definitely different avenues to do that, but at the end of the day, if you're overly restricting or you're overly eating, and either way, you have to get to the root of what's behind it, and
Right.
get to a place where you're able to have flexible thinking and grace filled thinking around food in either direction.
Mhm.
Yes. And that I went through a situation, I went through a situation about 2 year, well, a year and a half ago, where I was put on a very restrictive diet about a year ago now, put on a very restrictive diet, by my doctor because I had some autoimmune responses going on and they were ramping up very quickly. And it absolutely, he said, this is a short-term fix. We have to address the long-term solution. And we're going to find where the underlying cause is, but we're going to put you on this. And it was extremely helpful for a time. I knew it was a short time, but what happened was, because it was so restrictive, I noticed that I had to keep pulling things out to get any kind of, it was like my body became even more responsive to restriction. And
Mm-hmm.
I was pulling whole food groups out.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to the point where if I added anything back in, my body would react in ways that I wasn't used to. And again, my doctor's like, okay, now we can start adding some things back in. And I found myself, because I had eliminated whole food groups for about 6 months or so, it was very hard for me to let these things back in. And when I did, I
Yes.
got this all or nothing thinking about it. And that's my whole point of why I stick to processed food use disorder instead of food addiction. One of my points is because I think when we cut out whole food groups or we demonize a food group, that can set us up for thinking, oh my gosh, I can never have this again. So I'm just going to go ahead and eat all of it right now.
Yep.
And I say that because I lived it. I lived it in 2008. I lived it in 2023, 24. I lived it. And it
Yeah.
will keep happening if we don't have that balance. It will just keep happening. And I think
Yeah.
that's so important what you said about, you know, restriction in some ways, dietary restriction can be one tool. But guess what? When I understood finally that no matter how clean I ate or restricted I ate as far as a specific plan that I was given by my doctor, until I left the toxic relationship that I was living in, those symptoms never went away, no
Yep.
matter how restrictive I got. The minute that I left that toxic relationship, I never had another flare again.
Yep. I see that a
You
lot.
see, that's my point.
Yep.
I think it's like we get so caught up thinking food is the answer. And sometimes, again, it's another symptom of what needs to be looked at underneath it all.
Yes. I'm so grateful we are having this conversation. And I absolutely love what you guys are doing, because, yeah, at the end of the day, food is a tool. It is not anything other than that. It's not, it's neutral.
Yes.
And whole food. Real food is neutral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's body is different, and it's almost like reconnecting with yourself and like learning, okay, my body likes this, but this makes me feel weird, right? Like I'm really sensitive to blood sugar spikes, and it's like, okay, so I know when I eat foods like this, I don't feel as good. So then it's like, okay, I'm going to eat these foods that make me feel good, right? And
Yes.
it's almost like just when we when food is used to control or to soothe or whatever, we really are just disconnected from ourselves.
Right.
And at the end
That's
of the
right.
day, the goal is to reconnect with ourselves and love ourselves the way we deserve to be loved.
And part of loving ourselves is giving ourselves, the mitochondria inside our cells, the things that they are asking for, which are nutrients, which you cannot get from hot fries and crunchy Cheetos. I mean, that's never going to satisfy the mitochondria. So then you're always searching and looking for more, and you're more hungry because your cells are just starving for nutrients. So, one act of self love is to give your body the things that it actually needs
Mm.
in the form of the natural foods. I like to say pick foods that have had a growing and a death cycle. I mean, they aren't going to stay on your shelf. You know, a box of Captain Crunch can stay on your shelf for, I don't know, a year, but things that rot within a few weeks, you know, that unless you're talking about like rice or oats or
Pasta.
things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But things that have had some sun and water somewhere that was necessary for them to be created, that there is some type of nature involved in their creation, not a plant factory, but real
Yeah.
plants.
Yes. Good point.
Yeah. So you guys have talked about your community several times in your podcast and your book, but just as a recap before we wrap this up, can you reiterate again where people who are struggling with this can connect with you and also get your book so that they can, you know, move into recovery?
Well, so you can find our book on Amazon under Real Food Recovery. If food isn't the answer, what's the question? You can find us on Instagram at Real Food Recovery for you. That's the number 4 and the letter U. We're also on Facebook under Real Food Recovery. And then if you look us up on the internet, our website is realfoodrecoveryforyou.com. Again, the number 4, the letter U. And our podcast is on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube under Real Food Recovery. Have I gotten it all, Jamie?
Yeah. 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 And we do, the reason we do our podcast both ways, as Paige mentioned, we find that we've got folks that are, love the YouTube. They love to, sort of see and watch our episodes, and others just, listen when it gets downloaded every week on Apple or Spotify for them. So we have both, and our community is growing. We are very blessed. It'll be 2 years next month, almost
Oh,
to the day,
wow.
right? Two
Yeah.
years next month.
Yeah.
The end of the first
September
week, I think,
12th.
of
Yeah.
was it the 12th? There you
You know
go.
why? Because we didn't want to
So
do 9/11, so we started the day after. That's how I remember.
yeah, yes. So it was I can't
I
believe it
know
will be
that's
2 years.
crazy.
So it has been such a rewarding journey, I think. And again, it's living this for me, living this out and being, an perfectly imperfect example of what recovery looks like, when life hits you on life's terms.
Yeah.
That has been, I think, for me, a unexpected bonus of this journey. Not that long ago, probably when Paige and I started together, I would have, said, oh, it's got to look this way and it's got to be that way. And I was very legalistic about recovery. And life threw me so many curveballs since then that I have softened my perspective on things. And I think it's made me a better coach. I think it's made me a much more forgiving person. Um, and it's made me a much more trusting person of, God and the creator of the universe, higher power. And I think it's made me a much more vulnerable person for others to learn from. in recovery.
I love that so much. And what really speaks to me when I hear Jamie talking is there is no, you're going to laugh at this, cookie cutter way for for people to recover because everybody's journey is going to look different. So we are not out here trying to shove circles into square pegs. It's just not realistic in the world. That's not how people are. And it goes back to why we don't say, this is the food plan. You signed up and here's your sheet that has the food plan and what time you're supposed to eat it and you're supposed to do this and do that. No, 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 no. No. What works for me, what works for Marian, what works for Jamie, it's all going to be different. And that's beautiful because we've got this world made up of all these different beautiful flowers that have all these many colors. And so one of the things that we have found is the more people get away from the ultra processed foods and lean into the single ingredient foods, they're able to discover their true authentic self. I mean, I could have never written a book if I was deep in the sugar. You know, I could have never started a recovery program or a podcast. So it's allowing all these wonderful creative outlets to be born or tap into that were always there, just waiting to be discovered. But a lot of time for me, my experience has been the sugar kept me in a very muted place because I was so hyper focused on when can I get my next fixed and how can I white knuckle until I get there. So that takes up a lot of brain energy that once you don't have to even think about that, then you have the capacity to do all these other things. I started reading big girl books that I had never done before. I did a little bit of painting. I started doing some puzzles, things like that, that
That reconnecting to yourself.
yes, that bring me joy in other
Yeah.
ways than a chocolate chip cookie. How sad is that? That was my greatest joy. If I went to a wedding, all I cared about was that lady getting down the aisle because she was going way too slow. I'm just here for the cake. So, you know, we talk about connection is the opposite of addiction, and it has opened up pathways to connect like I never would have connected before. And what a big, beautiful life to be able to connect with people.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you again for taking the
Yeah.
Thank you.
time. I'm so excited to have connected with you and have a resource in you and in your
Oh,
community.
yeah, sure.
You said like it's everybody's in a different place, and the root behind it is what needs to be explored, and having the capacity and the support to be able to do that is, I mean, having support. I'm a big fan of the support as a health coach. I know like my whole goal is to make people's lives and journeys back to health as easy as possible.
We offer 7 hours a week of group coaching, and we have a WhatsApp that's going 24/7, 365. So anytime somebody needs just a little pick me up, there's a source that they can turn to.
Yeah, and it's just this journey of exploration, right? Of
Oh,
self-exploration. Like,
sure.
figuring out that my issue was connection took a while, and luckily I had the space and the guidance by going through school to figure that out. But I still couldn't have done it if my circle hadn't stepped up and like just shown up for
Right.
me,
Huge.
and
Mhm.
but
Totally.
Yeah.
to be vulnerable enough to
Yeah.
ask for help was so
Purpose and
hard for
connection
me.
are the two biggest healing things
It kind
for
of made me
human
want to
beings.
throw up every time I talked to one of my friends, and for somebody, if I had had somebody said it's okay to feel like that, but you still need to do it, I had to do it myself. I had to give myself my own pep talk, but it would have been so nice to have that support through it.
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
I'm just so grateful that you guys are using your experience and your journey to help others who are coming along behind you in the same way. It's so huge. And, I do want to stress that it's not just the overeating, but it's
Thank
using
you.
food as any form of connection, control,
Yes. Yeah, that's what you're connected
numbing.
to. Hmm.
Yeah. And, if that's you, that you have a
Mhm.
resource to be able to let go. I think that it's just so important, and not everybody understands it. It's a very lonely place to be. And
It
so to
is.
know that it's not so
I
lonely
agree.
is just such a blessing. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marian. Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
I hope you loved this discussion as much as I did. It is a passion of mine to give you resources and connections to improve your life in all the ways that you need. Food really can be such a struggle. Learning to eat mostly real food is challenging in our culture. We're busy. Cooking isn't something many people grew up doing with their family outside of the holidays, maybe. Many people think of vegetables as boiled, frozen vegetables that are mushy and bland, or maybe canned. If you are looking for a resource to help you get started on cooking and eating real food that tastes good and is simple to make, I have a meal plan program for you to help you get started. It is not designed for those struggling with eating disorders or food addiction. It is designed to give you a launching point in cooking and eating real food from the earth, and it tastes good and is simple to make. No need to be an expert in the kitchen either. You can be new to cooking or well versed in the kitchen. You'll be able to make meals and desserts that you and your loved ones will enjoy eating that also support your health versus tearing it down. And all those roadblocks that have hindered your journey in the past, you have a coach who can help you overcome them with different strategies and support so they no longer trip you up. You deserve to feel your absolute best, and I would love to help you navigate how to eat real food and enjoy it. Head down to the show notes to learn more about and how to connect with all of us and more about the meal plan program.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you found this episode helpful, would you do me a favor and help others find it by leaving a review, sharing a screenshot on social media, or sharing the link with a friend? By you sharing what you've learned, others are able to find this podcast and join our community. Be sure to check out my website, www.roadtolivingwhole.com, for over 160 delicious recipes, a variety of meal plans, and a blog packed full of even more healthy living tips. If you'd like to learn more about how to work with me as your coach, you can schedule a free consult through www.roadtolivingwhole.com/health-coaching/. Until next time, friend. Bye.